Right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the final episode of the Full Stack Journalism live podcast. This is our final one for this year. My name is Sabrina Faramarzi, and I run a non-profit media organization called Are We Europe? And a lot of our work is about diversifying and innovating the independent media landscape. And Full Stack Journalism is a project of ours that is really about exploring the tensions between independent media reporting on the very same big tech, reporting on big tech platforms, the very same platforms that they use to produce their journalism, and how we can essentially build a sort of public interest tech stack that is fair and ethical and supports journalism and healthy democracies. And I'm really excited today to have some of our speakers. But first, just a little bit of background about the project. It was born out of a network called Reference, which is a network of independent media organizations in Europe. And it really began as a question of how do we support each other and how do we share insights and knowledge about the kind of technology that we use. And from there, it blossomed into something bigger. And today we are recording live in front of a real audience here at Publix, which is a house for nonprofit media and democracy. And we're also live streaming online on LinkedIn for people who are viewing it there. But anyway, enough about me and the project. I want to start by introducing our speakers. So on my left is Jochen Adler, who is the founder of Compreno, which is a pan-European platform dedicated to sharing journalism across language barriers. And you transitioned into entrepreneurship a few years ago to address what you thought was believed to be a sort of fundamental barrier to European journalism and this kind of lack of a shared infrastructure. And Compreno is, you'll talk more about this and probably better than I will right now, but all about curating and translating high quality journalism into multiple languages and also able to go across topics and all kinds of different discovery. And a lot of your work has been grounded in how to build trust in journalism and democratic resilience, and regardless of the linguistic boundaries. And of course, in Europe, we have a lot of them. I'm excited to hear more about that and where you're at with that.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And then we have Neus Vidal, who is the executive director of the Seek Initiative, which is a very interesting organization that puts together journalists, civil society organizations, but most importantly, citizens for collaborative investigations. She's also a journalist, a political scientist, and has been a leading voice in all things around media transparency, press freedom. She's currently nearly finishing a PhD in FOIs, and before that was at the ECPMF, which is the European Centre for Press and Media Freedom, monitoring press freedom violations across the continent. But you also do a number of other things, and before that was at Spanish newspaper El País, and also contributes to a number of discussions and lectures at universities around these topics.
Thanks, Sabrina, and thanks for the very generous finishing my PhD, but yeah, thanks.
It's always a lengthy process. And then at the far end, we have Ludwig Siegele, who is the senior editor of and The Economist of AI Initiatives, but has been a seasoned technology journalist and reporting on the internet for
more than 25 years.
More than 25 years.
So I'm old.
But you served as the Economist US technology editor, Germany correspondent, and European business editor. So you've also gone across to the US and then back to Germany and across the different.
Yeah, I'm definitely mid-Atlantic. So
okay.
Yeah.
Nice. And what we're going to talk about today is more about your work in your current role, which is all about kind of the global coverage of AI's societal implications and how that kind of poses any existential risk to the way that we produce journalism and productivity revolutions in general. So hopefully I've given a good background to all of our speakers, but I'd love to start with perhaps a little bit more about how you kind of came to this work and what kind of things that you're exploring right now when it comes to models for the future of journalism. Would you like to start, Jochen?
Want me to go ahead? Yeah, I think collaboration is the name of the game. I think that's something we all share probably as we go around the table here, that we are open to exchange, approaches and ideas. And I'm not a journalist myself, but with the technology background that I have always worked on collaborative platforms, collaborative technologies, beginning with Skype and chat like ICQ and stuff like that. And it's great to see that journalism benefits so greatly from the exchange of ideas. And that's what Compreno is all about. You've mentioned it. Europe is unique, I would say, in its cultural richness and diversity and language diversity as well. But if you think of journalism from an economic point of view, from a business standpoint, that's a huge problem, right? We think about a global economy and the economies of scale and the digital transformation all the time. But up until recently, we haven't had the means to bring journalism that is already there in the world. It's fantastic, it's excellent, but maybe it comes from Albania and no one understands the language. So catch-22, right? And that's why I think the new technologies that we will probably discuss further are a fundamental threat, for sure, to copyright and rights ownership and all that. But they also give us the opportunity to find new audiences and make the excellent products that journalists produce, sometimes at the risk of their futures or their lives, more visible and bring them to the people where they spark joy or create value. And that's what Compreno is all about.
And how many languages do you personally speak?
English and German, that's 2. A bit of French, but when I was just on holiday in France, my family kept making fun of me because I can talk. I have a very musical ear, so when I talk French or even Italian, it sounds like a local, but then I quickly have to say, je comprends rien, or comprendo niente. So yeah, it stops at English and German for all professional purposes.
Yeah, and especially in the kind of context of, people who work on international journalism and cross-border issues and things like that. There is, huge language barriers, but of course with all kinds of different tools and AI, that's obviously becoming a lot easier. But I think it would be good to like sort of walk us through like what is Compreno, what is like the user journey of Compreno. Why would people subscribe? Why would people sign up? What are the values like and the benefits? Yeah,
I mean, as I explained, it came about as a very idealistic approach, I would say, to break these language barriers. And the idea was not to start up another newsroom. I think we have enough fantastic projects already, like Are We Europe, like, I don't know, The Economist, I could pick all these examples. The fantastic journalism is already there. And because I'm not a journalist by trade, I never had the idea of, starting up another publication. But given the talents that I had from the technology space, with language technology in particular, and strategic partnership business models, we focused on the distribution side. So if you think about us as a product, and I appreciate the chance to illustrate that in a couple of sentences, you can go to our website and you can subscribe to the best of European journalism, as we would like to call it, coming from 15 countries, and you get it curated to your interests and translated into your language, which is kind of cool, right? And we are partners with the European Press Prize now for 2 years in a row, going into our 3rd season. So the claim that we have the best European journalism is actually quite credible after a couple of years in this partnership and on the market. That's the audience side of it, right? You can subscribe and you can get your news feed in your pocket on your iPhone, for example, and it comes from trusted sources. There is no AI garbage there, but it's all from editorial products where genuine people are researching in a genuine and fair way. And the publisher side is that the revenue that we make is shared with our publishers transparently and freely. So for them, it actually means revenue from people who don't even understand their language. And we have evolved into other businesses and becoming almost like a marketplace where a publisher in Belgium, for example, can have the stories that they originally write in Flemish, Dutch, translated into French and English, so the people who are based in Brussels, can read them if they don't understand Dutch. So all kinds of business models can be realized, I would say, based on the capabilities that we have today that we saw coming, I shall say, 5 years ago when we started, and now everyone's talking about ChatGPT and the LLMs and blah, blah, blah. And we started to think about, okay, if this stuff goes mainstream, what can we do to give journalists new revenue streams and better futures?
And how many publishers do you have now as part of Compreno?
We have, I think, 30 or more than 30 that we have contracts with and partnerships in place. So we have regular contents from them, and they come from 15 countries, if I'm not mistaken. Through the partnership with the European Press Prize, we have isolated pieces and bits of content from even, I think, 22 countries and even more languages. I can't even count. But that's due to the generosity that the European Press Prize has with its authors. And out of principle, also, all the European Press Prize nominated articles that we have touched as translators are available for free to the general public. I've talked about revenue and, of course, a paywall and a subscription are barriers, especially when we talk about democracy and freedom of information, of course. So our offering is kind of elitist, if you say you have to pay. But the European Press Prize articles are free. And also, as a matter of principle, our offering is free for anyone under 25 years of age. Because we believe in education in democracy, and we didn't want to preclude especially young people from enjoying Europe's best journalism in their language or learning a foreign language if they so choose.
Nice. And actually, on that note, Neus, if you don't mind, I might skip you because I think this follows on very well to Ludwig, because Espresso has just opened to be free for students now, right? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I could tell you that we're doing this out of the goodness of our hearts, but no, we're kind of a profit-making company. The idea is more to get them early, to get them hooked on our content and then kind of sell them our rather expensive subscription. But that said, yes, it's important. I think it's important to make our content more accessible, more journalism more accessible, and that's why we're doing a lot in AI. I mean, our thinking is not kind of to use AI to replace journalists, to make my colleagues unemployed. It's much more, how can we use the technology to make it more broadly accessible? And translation is one thing. So in the Espresso app, it's not only free, we also translate it automatically, by the way, in 4 languages, German, Spanish, French, and Mandarin. And that's why we're doing summarizations. And we're also doing kind of subbing our videos, our TikTok videos, or at least some of them. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
And if I may interject, I was surprised at first when I started with Compreno, because for me, English was the lingua franca. And I thought, well, if we translate into English, that basically gives us, access to the world population. But it's not so simple. I mean, even in Germany, I have friends who are well educated, well read also. And they tell me when I send them an article from the Washington Post, or the New York Times, sorry, I don't feel comfortable reading an English text. So the translation that The Economist does, Mandarin, Chinese is a different beast, but I appreciate it. That's a good thought.
Yeah. I mean, it's also probably about making sure that your audience doesn't die out at a certain tipping point. And I don't mean that specifically for The Economist. Of course, there's
I have to
many
say our audience
newspapers
is actually on average quite old, like me. So like 60 years old or something. And we need to get people to read us if we want to survive not survive, but thrive in the long run. And given the changing kind of media consumption behavior of the younger folks, that's a problem. So we're not using just AI to translate, but we're also thinking more ahead, like 3 to 5 years. How could we present our our journalism, and I hesitate to say content, our journalism in a way that's more attractive to younger subscribers, which is not TikTok. We do have TikTok-like videos which are very successful, but that's not where we want to go.
But I think experimenting with short form journalism is at least, perhaps mirroring what kinds of other, where young people get the rest of their news from, right? How have you found the kind of success across different languages?
It's hard to say because we didn't put much into measuring it. I mean, these were more like internal experiments. Can we stand up a translation pipeline like yours? That if there, for example, if there is a demand, we see people like an article on Latin America, can we translate that into Spanish cheaply and quickly and in high quality? And that's what we've built. We haven't done it very often. I mean, we've done it this year. 1945, end of the World War. So we did a series on how we covered the end of the World War back then, and that we translated into German using that translation pipeline. And it's not huge, but it's incremental. It doesn't cost much, and we're learning how to do this. And kind of perhaps at some point we'll experiment with putting out The Economist as an audio product in Hindi or something like that. Why not? I think maybe quite successful. But I think it's a good way of extending what we're already doing and kind of not replacing what we're doing with AI.
Interesting. And Neus, talk to me a little bit more about how you kind of came to this work. And I know you've been doing quite a lot of stuff around how journalism and press freedom are attempting to, or maybe not attempting, to collaborate with big tech.
Yeah, so I was going to say my approach is quite different than the ones you had, because I've mostly been working on transparency and access to information regarding how big tech relate or work with journalism and work with government. So it's probably quite a different approach here. And essentially for me, it was a question as a journalist that we seem to be going into partnerships with big tech. We seem to be thinking all the time of like, how can we use AI and so on. But to me, the main question, journalism one, was not really solved, which was what do we know about these companies that we're actually partnering with? And this is how I started an investigation, which I can talk about now or later, but essentially was sending freedom of information requests to different governments across Europe, asking them something that I thought was very simple questions. Turns out it wasn't really that simple based on their
what were the questions?
But the questions were essentially different ministries across Europe that had the digital portfolio. It was, have you met with tech companies to discuss AI regulation? If so, I want to see the agenda and I want to see the minutes of those meetings. And the second question was, have you exchanged any written communication with these companies? Then I want to see a copy of that. Well, you wouldn't be surprised to hear that the answer of those ministries, most of those, they did reply, but we didn't get that much information. So it was mostly data privacy, commercial interest. That was an interesting one in the UK, in Ireland. They said, well, if we give you a lot of that might hurt commercial interest of these companies. So we didn't get that. Also internal drafts and so on. But what we did get, which I think is the main thing, is that we saw that there was we asked for the information in 2024, but we asked for 2023 data, which is the year when the EU AI Act was being negotiated. And we saw that there were lots of meetings with these companies, with all ministries across Europe. So we know those meetings are happening. We know they're discussing AI. We just don't know what's being said. We just don't know what's happening. One interesting one was, for example, we had Google actually sending emails to this ministry in Ireland saying, this is our view on AI regulation in Europe. And then the whole document was redacted, so we don't know what their views are. But we know that Google are actually sending their views to the Irish government. So this is not unusual. All of this is not unusual. This is part of the policy-making process. But because there's no transparency and not that much reporting, we're going into partnerships with companies about which we don't really know that much. And that's what worries me as a journalist, because in the end, reporting on tech is reporting on power. how do we build a model, and we can discuss that later on, that actually allows us to do that.
And do you think that that's changing now with the AI Act? Like that that it's mandatory to be sharing that information?
No, I mean, so far, we might be in a better place with the EU AI Act, DSA, and so on. There's some transparency provisions in those pieces of legislation. The thing is, for example, if you take DSA, there's a clause.
Digital Services Act.
Digital Services Act essentially would allow researchers and some civil society organizations to get information about social media companies, like their algorithms and so on. So technically, that is how it works. But the organizations that have tried to get information about that haven't really gotten. And actually, X has this court case in Berlin against an organization trying to get information. So will it get better? I don't know. And the amount of reporting that we have on this, there's some really good things like Karen Howe's book on AI and OpenAI and so on, but there isn't that much yet. And these are very powerful corporations. So I think for me, the main thing is how do we report on that more than how we collaborate on that, which I know it's something we have to do, but it's not the thing I would be doing first as a journalist.
But if they gave you the information, what do you hope to get? Do you think you'll have lots of surprises, stuff you wouldn't be able to predict? Having worked in Brussels and in DC, this is all pretty predictable stuff.
Yeah.
Or even if the information is going to be presented in a way that is understandable or clean or,
I think in terms of policy positions, it's pretty clear because most of these organizations, companies have actually shared their position. It's we don't want regulation in this, or we want regulation that's more flexible. So I don't think there would be big surprises on that. But I think we as citizens need to be able to compare their position with the actual final act and see what happened in between with those policymakers. And hopefully it's not too similar to what they pitch. And in terms of transparency of algorithms, yes, we need more on that because we just don't know what we're saying and why we're saying what we're saying. So that, I think there would be surprises, or we can imagine some things, but I don't think we can know exactly. So I would like to know more about that.
And just staying on this topic, how do you think we can involve the role of citizens to support journalism in holding big tech power to account and demanding more transparency?
Yes, so that's a very, very tricky question that we're actually working on how to do it, because just some context, the SIG initiative, the organization that I'm running, works essentially doing co-investigations between citizens and media companies or newsrooms. So we want to involve communities in doing investigations led by newsrooms, led by journalists. So we're trying to see how we can do that. And one of the problems is still that the very basic thing that usually we ask citizens to do, which is sending freedom of information requests or analyzing data and so on. When we don't have the data, it's very hard. What they can do, and we're hoping to do, and this is a call also to organizations that want to do this with us, is also trying to get citizens to report just what they see in terms of some of the things they see tailored at them on social media. So we want to work on a project about this so we get an idea, what are you saying? Because we don't know, it's a different thing that we all see, just trying to make sense of that. But I would hope they should be able also at some point to use this legislation to analyze the data that our researcher has asked for.
And we have a lot of students in the audience today as well, and understanding students' role in being able to do that too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we have some project that might just work with that. But definitely, I think young people generally are really interesting in terms of the amount of information they're getting online, which is pretty much everything. And we just can't have that full picture because it's tailored at them very specifically, also different for women and so on. So we really want to track that and make sure we understand, and we definitely need their collaboration in it. Until we can get the algorithm and see how it works, we just need people to tell us, what do you see? So we can report on that. And yeah, I think so far there isn't that much more we can do at the moment.
Yeah. And Ludwig, you're very much in-house and have sort of seen that change over a really long time. What are the different ways in which journalists are reporting and kind of battling, this sort of access or inaccess to power when we're talking about technology and journalism?
I mean, as I said, I've done it for 25 years. It's difficult, and it's getting more difficult. I mean, when I moved to the Valley in 1995, it was more like a guild. Guilds, VC firms were more like guilds, and if you knew some people, you were you got invited to dinners, and access was pretty direct. You could call people. You could call even people like Larry Ellis, and it's become a place where Silicon Valley, it's become a place where you have more PR people, 3 times more PR people than journalists. I think that's the latest number. And so even people you've known for years and who used to talk to you openly, they always check back with their PR handlers what they can say, and so it's difficult. But I mean that is to be expected given the amount of money involved. In the industry, the question is more what do you do about it? What can you do about it? And I think two things to keep in mind. My view is that in 3 to 5 years, or perhaps a bit longer, a lot of what journalists will do will be automated. So in news gathering, all the information which is out there in public, like information you've hopefully gathered, will be accessible by these machines, and so the situation will be within newsrooms a bit like Gutenberg and the scribes. So the scribes wrote, of course, that was their job, and all of a sudden you had these machines that could print and printed Bible, and it looked good. And so they had to reinvent themselves, and very often they reinvented themselves as printer. As a matter of fact, Gutenberg's apprentice was a former scribe, Peter Schöffer. And I think journalists have to do the same thing. And so in a way what's going to happen is that all the information that's digital and is public will be accessible by any publication instantly. And so actually shoe leather reporting, knowing people, having networks, talking to people, being on the ground will become more important, because that's the stuff these machines cannot hoover up automatically. So I'm not too pessimistic. I mean, there will be disruption. People will lose their jobs, and I think perhaps in 3 or 5 years, The Economist will have fewer journalists, but we will have journalists, and perhaps we will have better journalists, better connected journalists. So it goes both ways, but I'm kind of lost track of the question you asked me. I'm sorry about that.
No, all good. So just stay on this point. So will journalists be reinventing themselves as analog journalists?
I think that is one thing they will do. They will partially feed the beast. Do data curation, kind of which data do I feed into the machine in the middle, in the newsroom. They will do quality control at the end, what comes out. I mean, like translations, so we automate the translation, but we have humans look at the translation. They will, there's another machine being built, which is also going to be interesting. It's more like any type of content can be changed into other type of content. So they have multimodality. So if you see the videos on the New York Times website or in the app, that's basically automatically produced by some model. You can turn text into speech. We know that. You can turn text into audio, interactive audio. So there will be a whole new type of news aggregators or news providers, content providers that can offer you the content in the way you want it. If you want to have a podcast at 8 o'clock in the morning, because that's when you do your run, and you want to have it 10 minutes, and you say, these are the sources I want it to be based on, you'll get that. And so journalists will have to work on that side too, kind of test that, quality control again. And of course, journalists will have to be much more out there. Like I'm out here talking to people in person on podcasts. That's will become more important. Yeah.
Okay, and so this episode is all about the kind of future models for journalism. So whether it's journalists actually being spending more time in the field instead of behind a computer screen, whether it's involving citizens more in the kind of collection of transparent data and holding power to account. And from your side, obviously you're speaking with publishers all the time. What kinds of challenges are you hearing from them when they're producing their journalism?
Question goes to me. I'm kind of reflecting as we speak on the role of the article as an artifact of journalism, because that's what we deal with today. So basically, we curate articles in their entirety, right? So they are pieces that are written by a human being in a trusted environment, in an editorial newsroom, or so that I don't know too much about as a career changer. But they are still articles, and I think the conversations that I'm increasingly having is what comes after the article, because this person crafting a piece, with an introduction and a punchline, a headline, a teaser text, and a finish, basically revealing some truths or making sense of something, that's not going away. I think we still need journalists to make sense of a world that is increasingly complex and fast-paced, and so we focus on analysis and reporting and opinion pieces, not the breaking news stuff. If something happens like 9/11 used to happen 25 years ago, back in the day I would put the TV on. Now I'd probably turn to YouTube or Twitch for some sort of live stream with interpretations. But what we focus on is maybe 2 days later or 3 days later, okay, how are these events sinking in? Well, how can we make sense of it? And that is uniquely, I think, what journalism is all about, to help us find orientation. And I don't think it's a worry, but the open question, like Ludwig I think hinted at, is, are people still going to be reading articles start to finish? At the moment, this is a differentiator for Compreno. Hey, we have full text, Le Monde in German, Die Zeit in Spanish, and if you want to read like something about Donald Trump's tariffs from a French perspective, in English, we have Le Monde in English, and you can read the whole thing, like the thought-through piece in its structure, in its entirety from start to finish. The only caveat, we translate it for you. But I totally see the use case that Ludwig just brought up. I mean, what people are looking for increasingly is, hey, I have 17 minutes of time to kill. I have these 5 subjects that I'm interested in. Give me 17 minutes of content, the dreaded word, video, audio, text, you name it, a PowerPoint, whatever. Because this is how I like to get my stuff. This is how I, as a subscriber, as a reader, formerly known as the reader, would like to consume news or analysis or opinion or commentary, reporting. And that's a challenge. I mean, I'd like to be there as a partner for our publishers, but that's, as you asked about the conversations, I think that's still kind of shaping up. People are going to be asking some chatbots some questions. Hey, what's going on in Bulgaria? Give me 7 bullet points, because I have a meeting with my boss coming up and I only have 5 minutes to prepare. And then we have to make sure that this content, these 7 bullet points for a 5-minute prep time for a meeting, are coming from trusted, relevant sources, edited by humans, fact-checked, sense-made, and not some trolley garbage that is funded by Putin.
Did you have?
Yes, the thing I wanted to add is actually so there's this concept of liquid content, so that things are going to get transferred or converted from one modality into another, and then there's this concept of course of personalization, and so this type of content, when you consume it, will be personalized. So we're working under the assumption that our readers will want personalization, and they will want us to know what they have read. So when we put together a summary, let's say an audio summary of our issue, that we focus on the stuff they don't know, or perhaps the stuff they want to know about. And so it's in a way, kind of consumption of content of journalism will become much more efficient. But that also means that the individual publisher will become less important and will be commoditized away. So the challenge for us, even for the economists, and we have a pretty strong brand, is how can we avoid that our content will just kind of be fed into some model or taken by some news aggregator and rehashed and represented in some way, because then we lose relationship with our readers, and that's kind of then kind of profits will go down definitely.
Yeah. And this seems to, in my view, I mean, this really correct me if I'm wrong, but in my view as an outsider, this seems to challenge the whole paradigm of editorial production, right? There used to be a newspaper that was printed or a magazine, and it was comprised of articles, shorter or longer, and the article was like the work of art or the piece of work that the journalist would hand in and get published. And as you said, I mean, there was always kind of reluctance to bundle or unbundle or rebundle content, because publishers would say, oh, maybe it hurts my brand if, some startup called Compreno republishes my stuff, but it does say The Economist, and so if they produce a bad translation, it falls back on the publishing brand. And I, as a startup founder, all the trust that we have built in our community is basically just borrowed from the brands that we work with, and I make sure every day that we don't lose it. But back to the original point, at this point in time, like Ludwig also explained, with language models, tearing content apart and pulling from various sources, the whole idea of the article as a form seems to be not just being rebundled, but also disintegrating. Like LLMs are just pulling facts or fiction together, and you can't say which is which. And in the end, you get an answer, but you don't precisely know where it's coming from and whether it can be trusted or taken at face value. That's the challenge, I guess, that we're all facing together.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with some things, but I would like to also bring in an article that I read recently on 404 Media, which I think I've got a headline here, was "The media's pivot to AI is not real and it's not going to work." I was going to summarize it, but I think pretty much that headline summarizes what it says. So, and I think there's 2 points that are quite interesting. And one is that I agree there's some journalism content that is going to be used, like whatever it is that we do, by LLMs or other companies and so on. There's that, but there's the part that I think is most important, which is the actual investigative journalism. So the things that are not created yet, that no one can aggregate. And I think those are the things that people would want to pay for. And we see it also with bigger brands. People are just moving into this podcaster that they really like someone they can trust, a human being. So I think the effort should also be more on that. And as someone who's not doing projects, then I can say that because I don't have to do it all the time. But it's essentially the part of for me, journalism is the part of, we need to find out what no one actually knows. And that is not something that AI can do. That is something that journalists need to do. And I think we really need to focus on that. And also something of the article, and we probably have different views on that, was that, there's the point of we need more community media and people want to see the person. But there's also that it's not a wise business model, because it's just taking the content, lots of AI. LLMs are just taking the content, and then journalism doesn't really get much revenue on that, as we see on Google now and so on. So that's not my field, but I would like to also
completely agree on you on what you said about kind of we need to kind of do the research. We need to kind of discover what isn't in computers yet. The thing is, well, though, I mean, but I disagree with what you said before, that AI in journalism is not reality. I mean, I agree it's difficult. I mean, the progress we've made, given the hype, is pretty incremental. I mean, the revolution hasn't happened yet. And even, I mean, we spend not a lot of money, but we spend some money on that stuff. We don't have kind of the really popular AI-driven tool or new form of content developed yet. But I think what's happening here is that very often with tech, you overestimate what can happen in the near term, and you underestimate what happens in the long term. So I think people overestimate what these models can do for journalism. I mean, for us, they're just not good enough in many cases. I've tried to develop a style guide for The Economy based on AI and LLM. It just doesn't work because the damn thing can't see commas or individual characters. So it's not very helpful. But if you look how quickly these models evolve and get better, in 3 or 4 years, I think most of the writing, of the heavy lifting of writing, will be done by machines. Not perhaps at The Economist, but in most media, because it's just much cheaper and also better. And so you have to be very careful when you look at what media do today and kind of say, okay, it doesn't work, let's just forget about it. I don't believe that.
Yeah, can I just?
Yeah.
No. And do you think actually people would want to read that? My main worry is that people seem to be just going away from this, and I know like lots of things can be just like for internal use, or then you use it for a different thing, or just like tailored to someone wants to find out this. But I feel, at least when we've done some projects and so on, whatever people see AI generated things and so on, they just sort of run away from that. So in terms of product and business, do you think people would still want to pay for that, especially at The Economist, where I also pay for it, and it's very, the style of the writer and so on is very personal also.
It's a good question. I can't predict the future. My guess is that people will get used to that, at least for some type of journalism. I mean, people, when I grew up, there was a big debate whether we will ever have picture phones. And most people said in Germany, no, it's never going to happen. We don't want to be seen on a screen. So yes, that has changed, and I think it'll change. And maybe that people want AI generated content because it's faster, it's more reliable. You don't know. That said, I think for a publication like The Economist has always, our brand is we are made by clever, quote unquote, people, and so if we change that, we'll die. So we won't do that.
And just pulling it back ever so slightly to tech stack, are there any plans in the future to open source any of the tools that you're building, either at Compreno or The Economist? We started this podcast in talking about collaboration and how much of that is in the plans for the future.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all in favor of open source, though I'm not sure whether our tools are worth being put up on GitHub. That doesn't apply to our content. I mean, we're very protective when it comes to our articles, and I mean, I have to, whenever I work with a new startup, it takes days or weeks to negotiate with our lawyers because the terms, your terms, aren't good enough for us. So yes, we'll protect our content, but any tools, I mean, then again, this stuff isn't rocket science, and Jochen probably has developed something much better than I have when it comes to translation, and other people have too. So I'm not sure whether open source is the right question here.
Well, unfortunately, we didn't have the budget to, invent our own AI, large language model. If we had gotten, 50 million of funding from Google, maybe back in the day when that was still possible, that would have changed the game. So yeah, open source is a great paradigm, and I love it. And as you rightly kind of refocus the conversation on, if we talk about collaboration, stakeholdership and ownership has to be part of the conversation. And I sometimes feel under a bit of pressure to explain myself why I founded a for-profit entity and not a not-for-profit. We're not an NGO, right? We are a corporation, so we aspire to be profitable. And that doesn't mean that we maximize profits, though. We do want to reinvest. Like I say, we are already sharing the modest revenue that we have from our reader community with our partners, and especially in Southern Europe and Eastern Europe, I like to think that makes a huge difference. So the idea will be that they can maybe one day hire a part-time editor, and he gets or she gets funded entirely from readers in other European regions who don't even understand the language. Remember, that's the whole entry point. So when I start a new conversation with a new potential partner, sometimes I ask that question. So how much reader revenue do you currently make from people who don't read English, for example? And then they're like blank, like, what do you mean? Well, we can work together and change that. But back to the question of technology, like Ludwig said, I don't think what we have invented is so genuine that it needs to be immediately released to the public. But what I would like to say as a founder and as the chief stakeholder in my own company, I would like to let go. I mean, this is not about me at all. It's actually the vision that I have that it doesn't have to be an IPO, an initial public offering, but the stakes in the company that we've built and the technology that it contains should actually go to the publishers. They should own this, and the general public should own this. So I have some conversations coming up also with public service media representatives, which in Germany is a bit special and great that we have that. And there's a lot of talk about maybe there should be some sort of public service infrastructure to facilitate the type of journalistic exchanges that Compreno facilitates. So if I can play a part there, be my guest, right? I'll see you. Let's talk. But for the time being, I have to be a bit careful here because the appetite for transformation and change in the publishing houses that we work with today, as I said, is kind of limited. So even going away from articles and into new content forms presents a challenge. So if I was going to talk to every publisher about, hey, actually you can also own, I don't know, 0.5% of Compreno as part of the content license deal, I'd be talking to completely different people and it would make the whole conversation another dimension more complex. So I've shied away from that. But it's totally on my agenda. Like when we have reached a certain commercial maturity and a certain size also in terms of content in our archive and publishers as partners, I'm totally willing to give up this central control. It's not intended that way. We should really be a federal entity or federated system, a decentralized platform or a network. I like to call this a network much more than a platform because, yeah, based on what we've just discussed with the tech giants from Silicon Valley, I think the platform term is dead from my perspective.
No, I think the cooperative model is very fascinating, and there are some sort of success case studies, but very much in this sort of reader-backed way, as opposed to thinking about the actual infrastructure of how media is built and between media.
Maybe, sorry to interrupt, but one question I'm being asked a lot, and I just thought the answer fits nicely into this narrative. Sometimes people ask me, well, how do you choose your partners? How can you make sure that this new partner from Bulgaria is actually credible? Because, as I said earlier, they could be funded by Putin and just use ChatGPT and Midjourney to produce a website that looks fancy, but it's completely fake. So my best answer so far is, well, we've got 30 partners already. We just ask them. So before we take the 31st partner on board, I could ask my current partners, do you trust these guys? And do you think they should be included in our network? And I think that's a pretty good answer. But the better answer, or yet even better answer back to your question would be, why don't we have some sort of a corporate governance body where the partners have skin in the game and shared ownership of the network that we've built? That would be my
We're working on
vision.
it.
Yeah, and then the technology could be open sourced. I wouldn't care. But stakeholdership should be the first step, and then we can talk about technology.
So I have a lot more questions, but we've only got 10 minutes, so I should give it over to the audience. Does anyone have any questions? Maddie is around with a microphone.
So I'm not throwing it.
Up here in the front, Maddie.
Hi, Gibran Mena here. Thank you for the in-depth talk about AI. So some days I look very young, but I've been 15 years into journalism. Oh. I would take okay. So I've been 15 years already into journalism, and I already seen a lot of what the tech hype made to independent media, mostly in Latin America, where I'm from, when the algorithms of Meta, or back then Facebook, the social media platforms changed, and many independent outlets that relied on the quote unquote direct connection with the readers just went away from one day to the other. And also I co-founded a data journalism outlet, and I work with AI, and I know that open source algorithms such as Hugging Face, for instance, are just not as good as OpenAI's or corporate large language models. So I wonder if you think or have this preoccupation that we are as journalists not in control, as we were not in control of social media algorithms, and in spite of them being so powerful and effective, we are going to lose a lot in the long term if we just keep using them, and how to go away from this kind of paradox.
I mean, first of all, I don't think I wouldn't agree that open source models are not as good as proprietary ones. I mean, if you DeepSeek, the Chinese ones, if you want to use them, are just as good. I mean, good enough, I think, to be used in journalism context. I mean, you don't always have to use the best model for translations or for summaries. That's one thing. The other thing I wanted to point out is, yes, AI kind of strengthens the big tech platforms, but it also empowers small media outfits. I mean, I know a number of people, and often they publish on Substack, who make extensive use of AI and couldn't do what they're doing without the AI tools. And so I think technology always cuts both ways. Yes, we have the big tech platforms, but we also have, I think, or will have, a variety of smaller content or publishers in ways we have never seen before. So I'm not sure which side or which cut is going to be worse or better at this point.
No, I was just going to say I do agree with you, and you asked, like, do you worry? Yes, I worry every day about lots of things, but that's one of those. And I think every journalist who's not worried about that is actually not living in the real world, right? So we're all wondering what are the benefits, how can we work with them, but not too much, and so on. And I don't think there's anyone who has a proper answer yet as to what's going to work. So just to say, yes, we do feel the same thing, and you are not alone in that, but I can't give you the proper answer to it. We're just trying to navigate it. I don't think anyone knows exactly how to strike the right balance on this.
Yeah, and I'll try to keep it really short so we can squeeze in more questions. But I think the answer to your worry or question would depend on whether your revenue comes from readers versus from advertising. And at Compreno, we nurture the community of readers. We are exclusively funded by our readers. We have no advertising whatsoever in our product, and I try to keep it that way, because now with the advent of chatbots and LLMs, everyone sees the traffic drop, from social media, from Google, and if you were dependent on advertising, you'd be in even more serious trouble. So that would be my differentiation, and whether you're using the right mix of reader revenue and advertising revenue is a whole different conversation, but it usually changes the aspects to your question.
Hi, so I'm Anna and I work for Tactical Tech. Basically what we do right now is to work with independent media to understand how they can use AI from a responsible point of view. But I wanted to I have a question and an anecdote. So the question will be, you mentioned how you want to protect content, and you also mentioned the need to work in this content licensing. And when we use these large language models, we have this trade-off, right? So we are basically providing them with our content, so they give us an output in exchange. But then there are some sectors that are already coming together to try to put some boundaries and say, okay, artists, there are some boundaries that we want to put for you, mainstream technologies, AI technologies. And I believe in journalism, this is something that we also need to do, to come together and somehow advocate for our rights, the rights that we have on our content. The problem is that, of course, there is this trade-off, and we are giving the content, they are using it to train the models. So I don't know what are your thoughts on that. And then my anecdote. My favorite media in Colombia, 2 weeks ago, they posted, this is our first edition produced 100% with AI. And I went to bed and I wanted to cry. I felt betrayed. And then La República.
Okay.
And they were putting it as something they were proud of, but it broke my heart, seriously. And I remember this report from Reuters that said that people were feeling uncomfortable with this kind of content. And this, I believe, is also because different to what happened with social media. Right now, there are more conversations about what AI means in terms of society, the environment, politically. So there is more. There are more conversations about the impact of AI, and that also changes the perception of people when they see produced, generated by AI. It's like, oh, in my case, maybe it's my generation. I don't know how other audiences are reacting to that, but I went to bed and I was really feeling really uncomfortable. And I'm still thinking, I really need to send a private DM. because I have it here inside. So yeah, I have the question and the anecdote.
Just to, I will add one more question onto the end of that before you guys answer. From one of our online audience members, Thomas Hanker, who is asking whether AI is driving down readership in some media. And just to follow on from Anna's disappointing,
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly driving down traffic. I mean, the AI overviews or ChatGPT, I mean, and Google, you have a growing number of searches where there's no click-through whatsoever to us, and we can see that, and it's a problem, and we don't know how to react to this at this point, other than kind of, yes, we prepare ourselves for a world where we no longer get this type of traffic from Google, from search engines. On your first question, and kind of ties back to the open source question, I think what we need is open source, but we also need open markets. And you're probably not surprised to hear that from somebody who works for The Economist. But I think if you look at what's happening right now online, is that soon you will have more bots going to websites than humans. I mean, the bot traffic we get and other publications get is huge, and it's a huge cost factor. And that's because they can go there and get it for free. And we can block them if we try to, and sometimes we succeed, but there's clever bots. Or in the case of Google, you can't block them, because if you block Google, you also get blocked in you don't appear in their search engine. So what you need is a system where when people scrape you, when people take your content, that you get money, and for that you need a marketplace. And there's several initiatives trying to develop that. Tollbit is one, or Prorata. There's different ways, very small, very early, but could work. And then there's, of course, Cloudflare, which is trying to build a marketplace. And we need that, because if we have that, we can kind of perhaps at least solve part of the business model problem. And people who get scraped, people who offer good content, get money for what they produce. It's not human readers, it's not advertising, but it may be some money nevertheless.
Yeah, in terms of joint action also, because you mentioned that there's also some publishers associations and European Federation of Journalists and so on, although their views might be perhaps more about just let's ban companies from doing this and so on. But there is, I mean, pretty much every press freedom organization and also media company are sort of in talks about that. So there's some joint positions, some differences and so on. So there is some movement on that that's happening. And there's also just more of a legal thing, but there's a few legal cases with copyright that will be interesting to watch, because so far they've had different outcomes also in different countries. So we don't know what's going to happen with that, but there is a lot of it that will come into journalism that I think will come through these copyright cases. So there's something about that. And the second thing is just I'm very curious, how was the edition that was made with AI? Was it actually worse? Could you tell it was really, really bad?
I could see that it was not a human.
Yeah. Right. I just needed to ask that. So.
Yeah, really quick again. I can't add much. I don't think people would be willing to pay the price that journalistic products are worth if they were 100% made by AI. I mean, that's just something I don't understand either. Would be curious to see that edition from Colombia. I'll check it out after this recording. And yeah, I think that's it. As a founder of Compreno, in the beginning, I was looking for money also from my bank and from some business angels. I was framing Compreno as an AI company, but it isn't. I mean, it's really that's not what we're about, and it's not what we should be about. And the initiatives that Ludwig mentioned are super interesting, and also tie into my narrative that if we look to improve the state of journalism, we must look beyond the national boundaries, because all the problems that we've had to monetize the fantastic work of the editors and journalists have stopped at the national borders. And everyone asks me, why don't we have Spotify or Netflix models for news? Well, that's the answer, because they don't scale. Even in Germany, we have 80 million people plus some Austrians, some Swiss, but it's not the scale isn't there. And once we overcome this feudal system of islands with fragmented languages, we can talk about solutions at scale, and hopefully they will be better than what we had with Silicon Valley giants.
Not that kind of techno-feudalism.
Exactly, not that kind.
We have a couple more questions from our online audiences. I mean, we've touched upon them ever so slightly. So Maybe I'll say both questions and we can tackle it. We have one question from Sven Ehrman, who says that he read that Cloudflare considers charging AI crawlers and wonders if that really makes for a media business model. And then Neus, you touched upon a little bit, and probably what we can do is follow that up from a question from Claire Spencer, who asks, why hasn't the news industry collectively negotiated with big tech yet?
Do you want to take the first one?
I take the first one. Yes, that's a very good point. That's an open question whether something like Cloudflare or Tollbit, whether they can actually kind of collect enough money to power a publishing business. But search advertising at the beginning was also pennies, and it became quite a good source of money for some publications. So I don't know. And the second question.
Why hasn't the news industry collectively negotiated with big tech yet?
Hi, Claire. We're the biggest offender in a way, because we never negotiate with anybody. As I said, we protect our content, so we didn't license anything to Open AI or Anthropic, partially because, or mainly because they didn't pay us enough money. But we also didn't band together with other publishers in Britain or worldwide. That wasn't my decision, but that's kind of in our culture. We kind of don't do that. I also think that will be difficult. That's the pro rata model. Is that publishers band together and they kind of come to a consensus who produced what information and get paid per factoid in that model. But I think these kind of collective action organizations have shown to be rather difficult. Do you have a number? They work in Germany kind of, but I think Germany may be almost the only country where that's actually is working GEMA and VG-Wort. So I'm not sure. I would prefer to have some solution like Cloudflare, where you have a kind of a company offering a platform which clears or kind of makes sure that when people scrape content, pull down content to train, that they have to pay for it.
Yeah, just to add to that, I think in terms of collective negotiation with tech companies, I don't think that's going to happen, because it's never really happened like that with all publishers in Europe and so on negotiating something. And the first example that comes to mind is Google News. When we had Google News starting in Spain, Spanish publishers, they didn't want that, so that you don't get the news like that in Spain, although some Spanish publishers did want it, but then it's out for everyone, but you still get it in Germany or other countries. So actually a common position that gets everyone together and negotiates the common position, I don't think that's going to happen. But that said, there is some organizations like the European Federation of Journalists, publishers across Europe that are trying to see what are at least the common things that we can sort of ask for, probably not to tech companies directly, but at the EU level, European Commission level.
But as you said, it depends on the legal situation, depending on what's fair use or not.
Exactly.
Yep.
Okay, well, we've come to the end. Thank you very much. And I just want to say to everyone that we will be back with Full Stack Journalism, not as a podcast, but as a series of workshops where we're actually exploring how to kind of, particularly in the sort of governance space, how we can collectively explore how to build a tech stack that works for journalism, how we can do that collectively, but also how we can hold big tech accountable for their sins to journalism. But I just want to invite you in and thanking all of our speakers. Thank you all also for coming, and for everyone watching online as well.
Thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.